Legally, today's churches are corporations. As I'm sure you're aware, all corporations require a certain amount of growth to become sustainable. For church corporations, this means membership. The bigger the church, the more members it must maintain in order to pay the overhead. Obviously, this means as church corporations grow bigger, they are increasingly incentivized to cater to the crowd. Or, at the very least, they can't afford to lose the favor of the crowd. How drastically different this is from Jesus' example. At the height of his fame, Jesus had a following that would make even today's megachurch pastors envious. Yet it was precisely at the pinnacle of his popularity that Jesus preached his most controversial message to date, testing the crowd and actually driving them away. How could he ever afford such a loss if, like today's church leaders, he had been financially dependent upon the crowd? Another thing that is arresting about Jesus' relationship to the multitudes is that it wasn't nearly as much of a priority as his discipleship of the apostles. For instance, consider when the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Why do you speak to the people in parables?" He replied, "Because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them." In fact, Jesus put such a priority on discipleship that at the end of his ministry, he informed the Father, "None has been lost," even though thousands of followers had deserted him by now. However, Jesus seemed to believe the Father evaluated his entire ministry based solely on the fact that the handful of disciples he chose in the beginning were still with him at the end. This certainly flies in the face of today's conventional church wisdom. For instance, it's not that uncommon for today's churches to lose a certain number of their original members whenever they build bigger facilities. Since small churches feel more like families, whereas large churches tend to function like a company, growing bigger churches rather than planting additional smaller churches can be a deal breaker for some members. Of course, mathematically speaking, the loss doesn't really matter. For every member the church loses during a building project, they will probably gain several more. But what if God evaluated all ministries the same way he did Jesus' ministry? What if each of us were given not just a certain number of people, but specific people? Meaning, what if God entrusts particular people to us, and those people are our real ministry, whereas everyone else we touch simply comes out of the overflow of that ministry? If so, is it possible that some of us might stand before the Lord one day, proudly proclaiming, "Lord, look at all these I brought you," only to hear his heartbroken reply, "That's great, but what happened to the ones I gave you?" To see how Christ modeled the picture of the perfect church through his own ministry, yet why we get it completely backwards today, click the link on screen or in the description. At the end of the post, you'll find information on how to make your own animations, like the one you just saw.